Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our County Council meeting this afternoon. Councilmember Mink is with us online. We have item number 5 on our agenda is a public hearing and action on a resolution to approve an amendment to the FY 25 to 30 Capital Improvements Program and Supplemental Appropriation 25-88 to the FY 26 capital budget, Montgomery County Government, Department of Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions, Montgomery Connects, project number P341700 in the amount of over $6 million. Federal aid is about $6.1 million, and contributions are over $43,000. Council is scheduled to immediately take action on this after the hearing, and there are no registered speakers for this hearing, so the public hearing is now closed, and we'll move on to our action portion of this item. Is there a motion to approve the amendment to the FY 25 to 30 Capital Improvements Program and Supplemental Appropriations 25-88? Councilmember Sales moved. Do I have a second? Council Vice President Jawando seconded. Seeing no questions or comments, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is everyone present and online. All right. Next, we are moving on to Legislative Day 19. This is the Council's 19th legislative session. Item 6 is the introduction of bills. There is one bill for introduction. It's Bill 28-25. Motor vehicles and traffic, parking and bikeways prohibited. The lead sponsor is Councilmember Glass. Co-sponsors are Councilmembers Lukey, Friedson, and Fanny Gonzalez. A public hearing is scheduled for September 30th at 1:30 p.m. I will turn it over to Councilmember Glass to talk about his bill.
Thank you very much, Madam President. In the first 6 months of this year, there have been 59 cyclist-involved crashes and 1 fatality here in Montgomery County. We have invested heavily in our bicycle infrastructure, but we have not provided the enforcement and the additional protection for that infrastructure. We know that dedicated bike lanes are critical to multimodal transit, but only if people can actually use them safely. We all hear from residents who say that they often don't see people using the bike lanes. And one of the reasons not as many people are is because they don't feel safe. And the legislation I'm introducing today will enhance safety for cyclists by prohibiting the standing, stopping, or parking of vehicles in our dedicated bikeways. This legislation builds upon the Safe Streets Act and our ongoing work to protect people in intersections and crosswalks, continued investment in our infrastructure and making our streets safe for everybody. The legislation also enforces our Vision Zero goals of eliminating traffic fatalities and also aligns, this policy does, with jurisdictions like the City of Rockville, the District of Columbia, and Howard County, all of which prohibit parking in bike lanes. And so I want to thank Council Members Lutke, Friedson, and Fanny Gonzalez for co-sponsoring this. Also want to support and thank our transit community, including the Washington Area Bicyclists Association and the Action Committee for Transit for their advocacy and support. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Ms. Wellens, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add. Thank you, Madam President.
All right. This bill is now introduced. We will move on now to bills for final reading. There are 2 bills for final reading today. The first is Expedited Bill 16-25, Personnel Employees Retirement System Membership Requirements and Membership Group. The Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee recommends enactments. And so basically, when we took this up, this expedited bill, this would make certain emergency communication managers are eligible for retirement group E and generally amend the law regarding the employees' retirement system. We needed to take up this expedited bill to correct a drafting oversight that occurred in 2023 with expedited bill 20-23, under which emergency communications center personnel, including ECC managers 2, were added to Group E of the Employees Retirement System. ECC Managers 3, however, were unintentionally omitted from Group E. So this expedited bill would add ECC Managers 3 to Group E eligibility, retroactive to the effective date of the expedited bill 20-23, which is August 7th, 2023. And this is unanimously recommended by the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. Anything to add, Ms. Wellens?
Nothing to add, thank you.
All right. Not seeing any other comments or anything. We have a motion from the Government Operations Fiscal Policy Committee. This is a roll call vote. I'll turn it over to the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Lukey.
Yes.
Councilmember Lukey votes yes. Councilmember Mink.
Yes.
Councilmember Mink votes yes. Councilmember Sale.
Yes.
Councilmember Sales votes yes. Councilmember Friesen.
Yes.
Councilmember Friesen votes yes. Councilmember Glass.
Yes.
Councilmember Glass votes yes. Councilmember Katz.
Yes.
Councilmember Katz votes yes. Councilmember Albornoz.
Yes.
Councilmember Albornoz votes yes. Councilmember Finding Gonzalez.
Yes.
Councilmember Finding Gonzalez votes yes. Councilmember Balcom.
Yes.
Councilmember Balcom votes yes. Councilmember Jawando.
Yes.
Councilmember Jawando votes yes. Councilmember Stewart.
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart votes yes.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Wellens. Our next bill for final reading is Bill 17-25, Contracts and Procurement, General Provisions, Exemptions, Internet Access Services. The Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee recommends unanimously the enactment of this bill with amendments. Basically, this bill would exempt the acquisition of Internet Access Service from the procurement law. The committee did adopt an amendment to require the procurements to be governed by administrative procedure consistent with Section 2A-16 of the County Code. As it was introduced with procedures approved by the Chief Administrative Officer, but the committee discussed how it would be more appropriate and allow for more transparency if this was done through administrative procedures. Due to the approaching time and dollar threshold limitations of the existing waiver that is in place, our county staff recommended that the bill be expedited, which requires 7 votes from the full council. And Mr. Gorzelak, did I miss anything?
Got everything.
All right, I got everything. Any questions or comments? Not seeing any. We have a motion from the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. I will turn it over to the clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lukey.
Yes.
Councilmember Lukey votes yes. Councilmember Mink.
Yes.
Councilmember Mink votes yes. Councilmember Sales.
Yes.
Councilmember Sales votes yes. Councilmember Friesen.
Yes.
Councilmember Friesen votes yes. Councilmember Glass.
Yes.
Councilmember Glass votes yes. Councilmember Katz.
Yes.
Councilmember Katz votes yes. Councilmember Albornoz.
Yes.
Councilmember Albornoz votes yes. Councilmember Finding Gonzalez.
Yes.
Councilmember Finding Gonzalez votes yes. Councilmember Balcom.
Yes.
Councilmember Balcom votes yes. Councilmember Jawando.
Yes.
Councilmember Jawando votes yes. Councilmember Stewart.
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart votes yes.
Great, thank you very much. All right, our next item on our agenda is item 8, which is a briefing from the Department of Transportation on their parking security pilot program. As folks are coming down to the table, I just want to thank the Department of Transportation for coming over today for this briefing. As my colleagues know, and as we have discussed, the council was made, and the public was made aware of this pilot program in a bit of a surprise by a news story last month. And understandably, we had a number of questions. Councilmember Katz and I sent a letter to the county executive and the director of transportation requesting a pause in the deployment of this pilot program until we had the opportunity to receive more information about it and ask questions. I very much appreciate Director Conklin for your response on that and coming here today. I do want to say that as a body, we've had many discussions about public safety, particularly public safety in the last few years in the downtown Silver Spring area. And I see we have Commander Kokinis with us today and other folks from our police department and the work that they've been doing down there. Regarding public safety. But for this project, this pilot project from the Department of Transportation was something that we haven't been discussing on this council. And we wanted to take this opportunity as the full council to understand where the program came from, how it will be administered, and what public engagement and outreach the Department of Transportation has been doing to get feedback from the community, as we did on the DRONUS First Responder program that's been so successful, and what the plans are to ensure that we have proper protections in place for folks' privacy and civil rights as we're looking at maintaining safety in our parking garages. So, Mr. Kenney, did you have anything to start us off with, or I'll just hand it over to Director Conklin?
Great, thank you. And I know we have some slides to share with you today, and I appreciate the opportunity to be before the council today to talk about this pilot program. And it is a pilot program because we do not yet know how effective this type of technology will be, but are interested in trying it out and seeing what kind of data we get, what kind of response we get, what kind of effectiveness there is. And again, you have our apologies for the way this was introduced to the county. It was not intended that the program would be announced through an early morning news story. There was an intention to have a more appropriate discussion of this and rollout of this pilot. But unfortunately, as the robot was charging, he caught some attention from media, and that's how we introduced the program. So we're here today to talk about how we really intend to introduce the program. The idea of this security robot came to our attention over a year ago with some deployment in other jurisdictions where they were being used to reduce the amount of vandalism and crime in some parking garages. And we began to explore what kind of opportunities there were for this, and actually conducted a full procurement following all of the county's procurement regulations and competitive solicitation for this program. And that's why there's been such a lag from when this idea first materialized till now, is those processes take time, and there's vetting of the various components of that through time. So if we could go to the first slide, what is it that we're hoping to achieve with this pilot? We have a multi-layered security approach in our parking garages with a combination of surveillance technologies, license plate readers, camera systems, and live personal security. And those services are also coordinated with our colleagues from the police and the urban district and the safety and security patrols that those folks have. What this pilot is hoping to do is create an additional visible presence of security in the parking facilities that is conducting many of the same activities that are already happening through those other systems, but in a way that is more obvious than perhaps a camera mounted on a wall or an occasional security guard patrolling the facility. So we're looking to augment the existing services and the existing systems in these garages, and to have a presence that hopefully reduces the amount of incidents we have and minimizes the amount of direct person-to-person interaction we have. For security reasons, we don't necessarily have positive outcomes when we are confronting folks who may be there for reasons other than parking or using the facility. We're hoping to improve the awareness of our customers about the work that's going on to improve the security environment in the county parking garages, and to increase the feeling of safety that the community has when using our facility. So we're hoping to have a visible presence that is a deterrent to bad actions in the garages, and should those actions occur, this device may collect information that's helpful to figuring out what happened by whom, and with investigations and later prosecution of those bad acts. The location, we selected parking garage 61, which is one of the busiest parking garages in the entire PLD system. It's over 1,200 spaces, 9,000 monthly customers. It's a large garage, large number of floors, and it's outside, which means that the communications with this device would work better than if it were a below-grade structure. It's one of the most public-facing garages. It serves the Veterans Plaza, the Fillmore, and large public events, and we also often have additional security at this garage due to large movements of people in and out of the facility, so it seemed like an appropriate location for this deployment. If we could go to the next slide, Stephen. We have about 660 security incidents in our garages each year. If you look at the chart on the left, it shows the distribution of the parking supply across the 3 parking lot districts, where Silver Spring is the orange color, Wheaton is the green color, and Bethesda is the blue color. So you can see that, we have a relatively even percentage of the parking in Bethesda and Silver Spring, and a smaller amount in Wheaton. When we look at where the security incidents occur, a larger number of those are in Silver Spring than in the other 2 parking lot districts. And then if we look more specifically within the Silver Spring parking lot district, we can look at the events that occur across the garages in downtown Silver Spring. So The largest number of events are in Garage 5 and 55, which is the one next to the metro station in downtown Silver Spring. But that garage is not as heavily used as Garage 61, which has more coming and going of the public in it. And Garage 61 represents about 20% of the incidents that occur in the downtown Silver Spring parking lot district. I would mention that most of the incidents that occur in the parking facilities are minor in nature. There are complaints about trash, there are complaints about cleanliness, there are complaints about facility condition, but we do have events that are property damage. We have events that are theft. We have theft from auto as a major component of this. We do not have a lot of person-to-person violence in the incidents in these garages. The vast majority are damage to property, theft of property, and of those are the ones that are significant. The vast majority of the incidents overall are not significant. They are loitering, trash, or facility condition and alarms and things like that. So they are safe facilities, but this is the location where we have a high number of incidents compared to other facilities within the system. When we started to look at the idea of the security robot, we looked at the suite of facility services that are currently deployed in the parking garages, and we have, as I mentioned, fixed camera locations, license plate readers. We do not have facial recognition generally in these garages. Fixed cameras are largely at the entrances and exits and some stairwells and other heavily trafficked areas. In Garage 61, we have 2 to 5 security personnel on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And those personnel patrol on a regular route through the garage. The robot is doing many of the same things, but in a different form. Obviously, the fixed cameras are in certain locations, and you may know where they are, and they're more ordinary to encounter in a public environment. The robot will conduct a patrol through the garage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on a regular cycle with a charging interval, and it is recording video on a 360-degree camera. It is navigating by LiDAR and by learning the garage. So actually what Parker was going to do when he was discovered was start to learn the layout of the garage before doing any security-related services. It has a license plate reader which can detect vehicles as they enter the garage and keep a log of them. This information is already collected in this garage at the entrances and exits, so it's another way of collecting that. It can sense the presence of people or groups of people, but it cannot identify who those people are. So that if we have, for example, a gathering of folks on an upper level of the garage where there aren't a lot of parkers, I don't mean parkers the robot, I mean parkers parking their vehicles, the robot can identify that and alert that there's a number of people here and it's not clear why they are here. And other security can be respond to that. It will return to its base to charge between every patrol cycle. It also has a push button that can allow someone to summon help, and that has been coordinated with county security so that they have a set of protocols to identify whether this is a bona fide emergency, which requires a 911 response, or if this is a complaint or issue that can be de-escalated and handled by other personnel. And it will announce itself so that people are aware that it's moving around. During the daytime, it may have a message, something like, "Welcome to the Town Square Parking Garage. We hope you enjoy your visit to Silver Spring. Don't forget to pay," because it's much more expensive if you pay a fine than the fare or the fee. And in the evening, it could announce that it's conducting a security patrol, in the overnight hours when the garage is quieter, to have that presence available. And again, these are many of the things that are already happening in different forms, either with personnel, contract personnel, or with other electronic devices in the garage. So a little bit more about the features of the robot. It will log events that it encounters either in the video or through its presence detection. And those events could be things like somebody hanging out near a vehicle or other events that might trigger a later review of the footage to see if there was something committed there and to look into what events happened. Again, it will have multi-language messages that can be broadcast, and this video will be reviewed and those incidents flagged and later reviewed. It's stored for a limited period of time, 30 days, for records research if needed. If there is an incident that may be criminal, that data can be stored longer, can be retrieved from the system and stored for a longer period of time. And then security personnel will review those logs and see whether there's additional follow-up needed based on what was actually observed during that period. The next slide, please. What is the nature of the agreement? We have a one-year agreement with the provider of this robot. The 1 year is about a $90,000 payment that was negotiated down from a higher amount and allows us to use this robot for a year. It is entirely serviced by the company, and all the liabilities associated with the robot in terms of repair, replacement, damage, theft of the robot, if someone happened to steal it, are the responsibility of the vendor, and the county is not responsible for anything regarding the operation of the robot in that regard. As I mentioned, the data is stored for 30 days. We retain 100% ownership of this data. It's shareable with law enforcement should an incident be identified and there's something in this video that would be useful. It would also be available for MPIA discovery with county attorney approval if somebody requested information about something the robot may have recorded related to a personal matter. And again, it will traverse the garage on a regular cycle. The company, on the next slide, the company that we've contracted, again, was selected through an open solicitation. There were not multiple bidders, but this bidder was responsive to the criteria. In that, this is a vendor much like the police body camera video as a provider of surveillance and electronic equipment for the law enforcement industry. It's a U.S. company, publicly traded in California, and has been in business for over a decade. Has a lot of different clients. I actually ran into a personal friend this weekend who showed me a picture of Parker's cousin, Walker, doing a sidewalk patrol in Portland, Oregon. So it's not a brand new technology. It is in use in other locations. A lot of convention center, casino, other large public event environments are using this. And it has some of the highest data security possible for these types of systems with this FedRAMP certification. So we have strong confidence in the data security of the company. Go to the next slide, please. The council president talked about what outreach has occurred. At this date, no outreach has occurred. But we are intending to have a variety of events over the summer and into the fall to introduce the concept of this program to the public. One of the things we're contemplating is a town hall type meeting where parking operations staff can discuss the existing security program in the parking garage and introduce how this will complement the existing services we have. We're talking about having events where we can meet the robot, where you can go to the garage where the robot is in service, talk to staff about what the robot is going to do, kind of understand the function and form of the robot and how it will operate. We intend to have listening sessions at a variety of time slots throughout the day in the garage so that people who are visiting Silver Spring at night can visit with the robot at night. If you're an office worker in Silver Spring, you can visit with the robot when you show up to work. If you go to Silver Spring for lunch, you can meet with the robot at lunch when you're there for that sort of purpose. We will not have the robot deployed in service during this period of time, but we will pull the robot out so it can be seen and people can interact with it during this public engagement process. In terms of a tentative schedule on the next slide, for when we're going to be starting these activities, we are looking to get underway in the second half of August, having the evening town hall and outreach session in the second half of August. Again, starting those, Meet Parker in the garage events. Again, the 22nd of August, looking to meet with the Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce in the 27th, having that morning information table on the 30th, work with the Urban District Advisory Committee in September. We're definitely interested in other ideas for groups to connect with and share information with that the council members or your staff may have available that we can talk with. And then we were looking at near the end of September to summarize the information that we've received from the public engagement, understand what operational protocols and limitations we may want to put on this program on the basis of the public input received, and then schedule a time in late September, early October to launch a pilot application of the robot in service. And in your packet, there are a number of different protocols that council staff had assembled from the police about the operations of these programs, and we would look to document the operational program for Parker in a similar manner as those other programs have been documented. And just a little bit about what Parker will actually do. It will, on an hour-and-a-half basis, patrol the garage, the floors and the ramps in a prescribed route like you see here, and then return for its charge. And then it can be dispatched if we have, for example, notification of a car fire on a level of the garage, which happens on a more routine basis than we'd like it to. Parker can go and put eyes on the car fire, give some sense of how large it is, what type of response is it an electrical fire, is it a gas fire, and help provide that information to the security team and eventually to first responders. It can be, and in those situations, it can be actively monitored rather than the data just being logged. Again, it will log the things it sees, it will log license plate data, it will make those announcements, and people can request help from the robot if they're near it and need some assistance. What it can't do, it cannot make a complaint or identify criminal behavior. So it will not call police and say something is happening and I'm seeing it. Thank you. It can't determine events and the significance of the event by itself. It merely will log them. It is not recording audio, so it will not report on the conversation you're having with your spouse after dinner. And it does not connect to other flagged databases for stolen cars or other lookouts. So those capabilities are not present in the pilot now. At the conclusion of the pilot, could be evaluated whether those capabilities are worthwhile or not worthwhile. So that's a sense of what it will do on a day-to-day basis. And then some of the answers to the questions that council members had for us. What information will be stored? It will restore the license plate data and the video data, and it will be stored for 30 days unless we request download of an incident, and then after that 30 days it will be deleted. What will happen if we're reviewing events and observe something? In the instance where we are actively watching something through Parker, if we see an event, we will notify the police, our own security team, the monitor of the robot, RTX, which is part of the company Nightscope, will notify us, the police, and our on-site security that there's an incident. It does have lights and sirens and a PA, so you could make announcements through the robot if you were observing something happening in progress. What happens if something's reported after it occurs? Like I mentioned, we have the data saved for 30 days. We can go see if there is any evidence captured by the robot. If there is, it can be pulled and retained by law enforcement for later use. In terms of data access and security, what protections do we have to make sure that the data is used properly? MCDOT will be the sole owner of the data. The company, Nightscope, does not have the ability to use this data for any private purpose. They are allowed to use performance metrics from the robot to identify whether it's performing well or not well, and identify any mechanical or other data or other software operational issues with the robot. Are we developing guidelines for how to use Parker and the information collected? Yes, as we roll out this public engagement, we're going to understand what issues of concern the public has, and we will formalize the operational parameters of Parker before we launch the pilot. And again, the data security elements were reviewed through TEBS as part of the procurement process and are in line or more stringent than many of the other data security protocols that are in place for other systems. Are there parameters where Nightscope can access the footage? Yes, they can review the footage through their logging of these events for our attention. And as I mentioned, they can look at other performance data from the robot to make sure that it's working properly. And they can use the data to understand if the robot has to be removed for service because it's malfunctioning in some way. Do they have the use to use this data for other purposes? No, the data is 100% the property of the county, and they have no license or rights through this contract to use it for their own purposes, only for purposes that the owner of the data permits. And that was the overview of Parker. We're hopeful that this is a helpful addition to the security systems that are in place in the parking garages. If we have a lot of negative feedback through public engagement, obviously we would need to consider whether or not the pilot should proceed. And at the end of the pilot, if we find Parker doesn't make a big difference, it may not be something we would want to do in the long term. But we are hoping through this pilot that we will be able to understand whether the presence of a device like this reduces the number of incidents generally in the parking garage. We are hoping that if there are incidents, the robot is able to gain useful information to help understand what those incidents were and if they're criminal, to aid in the prosecution of individuals who are committing those crimes. We are not hoping that the robot scares people. We are not hoping that the robot is monitoring people and doing the things they should ordinarily do and using that information for other purposes. So we are looking to establish metrics around the number of incidents, whether the robot is helpful in identifying the cause of incidents and bringing those issues to closure. And we are going to monitor information about whether the public likes this robot or feels threatened and intimidated and otherwise doesn't like this robot through the pilot. And then we will also be looking at the operational performance and was it able to complete the routes? Were there mechanical issues? Were there data transmission issues? And other things that just show the technology wasn't working as we hoped. So those are the sorts of parameters that we're looking to gain through the pilot should we move forward with it later in October. So happy to answer any other questions. Mr. Tamano is with us. The police representatives are with us, and they've been part of the coordination on how this pilot might get underway. So thank you for that. And
Great.
anything you have for us, we're happy to try to address.
Great, thank you, Director Conklin. Lots of people have questions, and I just want to kick us off and just say, in particular, on the community engagement. Glad to see that outlined. Wish it had happened even before the idea of Parker became a reality. And I will say that at this time in our country, we had this conversation on transportation and environment yesterday, thinking about our leaf blower ban and how we're doing enforcement there. We are, as a body, very concerned about making sure that everyone in our community feels safe, and that means feeling safe from having pictures taken or video taken in a place where we have some families who don't go out anymore because they're concerned about immigration enforcement and other things. When we did the drone as first responder program, Councilmember Natalie Fenton-Gonzalez and I, we worked with Commander Coquinos, and I just kudos to my colleague. She held many meetings in multiple languages with food to gather community input. And so I'm glad to see what I would consider the beginnings of a community engagement plan. Doing it in August, not the best time, given when families may not be around as much. I would also ask that they are done in multiple languages, particularly if this is going to be put in a garage in downtown Silver Spring. You must hold something in Amharic, like full stop, and in Spanish. There may be other languages, but like if you are putting something like this in a garage in downtown Silver Spring, there must be something in Amharic. And I would ask also that you work closely with community groups who are working with different members of our community in that area to gather input, because frankly, it's one thing to say, oh, here's Parker in the garage, and that's great. And some community members may feel very comfortable coming to you and giving you their opinions. And given where we are in our community right now, others may not. And I think we need to make sure we're gathering their thoughts as well, because the last thing we want to do is deter people from coming out into the community. I will say I would also look at those dates, because we have a very large Ethiopian Day in Veterans Plaza. I believe it is August 30th. If I'm not wrong. But I would also think about, what are some ways of connecting with that community, and really looking at how we're listening to different members of the community, who's doing that outreach, and then thinking about how you may need to go into September, just given when people are around.
We intend to continue that
Yeah.
through September, yeah.
Great. I probably have a lot of other questions, but I'm going to turn it over to colleagues. And first, I'll start with Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate the presentation, and thank you, Director Conklin, for the slides. Very informative. Clearly, this is an effort to make our parking lots and our parking lot district safer for everybody, as the council president noted. Agree that we need to continue working to reduce the number of incidents in our parking garages, which is why this council, and I want to applaud the council president for advocating very strongly 2 budgets ago to increase, or to install, not increase. It went from very few, if not 0, to increasing through the budget the number of cameras that are in our downtown parking garages, which is an effort to make it feel safer as well. One of the things I found most helpful in this presentation was the side-by-side comparison about the safety precautions already existing and what this does as an enhancement. Can you just share the number of cameras that have already been installed, where we are in that process? And Mr. Tamana, I see you might have that information, but wanting to get a baseline of where we are, and that includes the cameras. And then the second question thereafter is, what are the actual enhancements that Parker provides above what we already do?
So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joe Stamana with MCDOT. So regarding the camera project, we started this in 2023. Prior to the project starting, for increasing cameras, we had a total of about 280 cameras in all of our facilities. As of today, we have about 488 cameras in all of our facilities. So it's almost a 70% increase in the number of cameras that we have installed. This particular location, which is Garage 61, we had 20 cameras prior to the project starting. We now have 36 cameras in this location. So that's about an 80% increase just in the town square garage. And we've added the LPR capability at entrances and exits, so it gives us additional information that way. In terms of the enhancement of what Parker brings in addition to what we currently have, it's really the autonomous nature of how it patrols the garage. That's one of the new features. And the second feature is really getting camera footage in areas where we currently have gaps, right? So if we have a gap and it's mobile and it gets that footage and there is an incident in progress, that is something we would not have captured prior to having Parker deployed. And finally, Parker is about 5 feet tall, 420 pounds, and walks at about 3 miles an hour. So it's a visible presence. So hopefully it's a deterrent to somebody that wants to have or has criminal intentions.
So thank you for all of that. Really good to know that over the last 2 years, there is 70% more cameras in our facilities across the county, and 80% more cameras in this one facility, in this one parking garage in downtown Silver Spring. This is just another set of eyes, a mobile set of eyes. And given that we already have license plate readers and other types of information gathering, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like this is just a mobile component.
That's correct. Yes. So it is a mobile component to what we currently have.
Thank you. As a resident of 25 years in that particular area, I've seen the evolution of our parking lot district across the entire central business district, and appreciate the department's focus on safety so that everybody, whether you live, work, or come to that area for hospitality and restaurants, everybody can feel safe. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you for this presentation and for your sincere willingness and appreciation for the need of community engagement. Though there was, in the very beginning, an eyebrow or two that were raised on the human side that we didn't know about this. It certainly speaks well of you to pivot as quickly as you did. All right, so you're not going to monitor this live, but how often does someone review the video?
Sure. So our DOT security manager during the day from time to time might review it, especially since it's a new technology, just to make sure things are working okay. In addition, we do get twice daily summary reports from Nightscope. So what Nightscope does is takes all the events that were logged throughout the day and condenses it into a summary report and sends it to us, saying, here's what Parker did on patrol today, kind of report. And it's really akin to what our security personnel would do right now. They come in for a shift, they check in with their supervisor. Supervisor tells them, hey, you got to be aware of these events that are happening in these areas, pay special attention to this. And then they go out, they monitor events, they log whatever they see, they come back, they debrief with the supervisor and say, here's what happened on my shift. So this is really intended to kind of mimic that kind of approach.
And how does Parker's day begin? Does someone cut Parker on so he can start patrol? Does someone have to plug Parker in? How does Parker get going?
So Parker patrols for about an hour and a half and then autonomously goes back to its charging station and recharges. And
By
then-
himself? I mean,
By himself.
Okay.
yes. So part of the learning process is Parker has to understand its environment, which is why we kind of defined what areas it can patrol and had to train it to use that facility so that it'll keep patrolling that for an hour and a half and then return back to charging. We can stop that manually if needed and say, don't patrol for the next 5 hours, or don't patrol level 2 for the next 5 hours.
And how long does it take Parker to go? Does he go through the entire garage?
So he goes through levels 2 through 5. It's a 7-story garage, but it's
Okay.
only going through to 2 through 5, primarily because most of the activity happens there. There's very little activity above that level. And secondly, in an hour and a half, again, depending on the kind of activity in the garage, he could do most of those levels in an hour and a half.
And how about for the stairwells?
The robot will not be doing the stairwell. So we're not reducing the number of staffing personnel, so that remains the same. So those resources will be redirected to do other areas probably more frequently.
And since we're leasing this, if Parker needs to be repaired or whatever, do they give us a loaner while Parker is on vacation? How does that work?
So the lease agreement that we have with them, there's a 72-hour service level agreement for replacement or repair of the robot.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I actually met Parker. I went to the Civic Center for an event, and I always park in reverse. Always, you guys probably know that. So I park in reverse, and I see this thing like in front of me.
It was me.
No, it was not you. It was Parker. Now I know his name. But two things came to mind. One is that I didn't see the logo, the Montgomery County DOT logo, at least. So that's a flag. That needs to be big, in my view. And two, Parker was so slow because he was in the middle of the parking lane of the garage, like when you're driving, and there were like 3 cars behind him because he was going so slowly that he was backing up traffic. And it's coming from me, having a problem with that. So that I did not like. And I look forward to your conclusion of your pilot and see the results, but I don't have a lot of high hopes just because it's so slow. And I just cannot see how effective it would be, but I could be wrong. I'm just giving you my perception. I did not take a picture. I felt like, let me take a picture of this thing, but I said, no, let's not do that because I felt like he was looking at me, and so I didn't do it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Vice President Jawando.
sounds kind of scary, actually. Thank you for the briefing, Director Conklin and team. Just a couple of questions to be additive. So, how long do you anticipate? Is a 1-year pilot in your view? Is that what you said?
Yes,
Okay.
the agreement's for a year.
So that'd be like August to August, or June to June at this point, I guess.
I don't know when he arrived.
End
Okay.
of June.
End of June.
End of June, okay.
And we are
so
discussing with the company about giving us a little bit more time, given that we're slower.
since we
on-
paused and
Yes, on
we asked you
deploying
to pause, and thank you for doing that,
Yeah.
by the way. Agree with Council President. I mean, I think it would have been nice to know beforehand and sooner. Before, I think, as you said, it was the robot was getting ready to start to scan the garage. Is that what you said? Something like that, to get the lay of the land. That was the
Yes.
when it was discovered by the news media. And Council Member Fanny Gonzalez.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I think you've heard. It would have been the better way to do it would have been to done some notification prior to us and to the public prior to that. I think you agree with that.
Without a doubt.
Okay, absolutely. Great. So we won't have any other, that won't happen again. And I agree also that it's a start on the outreach. There's more to do, but that's a good start. No audio and not connected to databases, you said, correct?
Correct.
So it can't upload anywhere other than the footage that
The single repository.
not
for
to
the-
anywhere. It's a closed system in that regard.
Yes. Housed by the company.
By the company that you have access to. You log in, I'm assuming, or some
Correct.
sort of interface.
Correct.
Okay, so the police department doesn't have access to it.
Not directly.
Okay, so how would the lion's share of my questions are going to be right here. So you said there's a DOT security manager who periodically will review, and then the robot gives twice a day reports. All right. So is that person or persons, and what training have they, or guidance or protocols have they been given of how to review the information, what to flag, and then the next set of questions are going to be the decision to refer to law enforcement or to anywhere else. But I'm presuming this is primarily to refer to law enforcement.
Okay, so to start off with the review of the footage. So again, post event, if our security manager does this with the camera footage that we have right now, so they're constantly reviewing things just to see how things are going. But if there was an incident, typically the path it follows is there is a police report filed, and the police request evidence or request our assistance. And they would reach out to our security manager and say, hey, we want to see if you have any footage related to this. So then the security manager would go in and review the footage and let them know if there is something pertinent. And if there is something, then download that and share that with the police.
So do I take that to understand that the exact same process for a still camera will be what you use for this robot?
Exactly.
Is there a form or some sort of, what's the paper trail on that request?
So typically there is a police report filed, and then there's a request made either to our security staff or somebody in the parking division, and it gets to our security staff ultimately.
Okay. So today, I mean, where I'm going here is around the privacy concerns that folks have expressed, right? So if there's even if you could, this could be this case for a camera footage too. What's the mechanism by which DOT personnel, security personnel, is the only one reviewing this, right? And the robot itself is not flagging any activity. There's no AI in it or anything like that.
No, the robot is flagging events that it identifies.
Based on some algorithm or
Based
that
on
it
some
has,
algorithm.
that something might have happened.
That something might have happened.
Okay,
And that's
so-
what's creating the logs that are reviewed.
Okay, so what are the parameters around the events it's flagging, and by whom, and have you reviewed those?
No, so that is again part of the training that we're going through with Nightscope, and we've stopped everything at this point, but it's to understand those details a little bit more. But the robot is again not making any decisions of any sort. And when it
is. It's deciding what to record and what not to, and what to flag.
it's recording everything. So
Well,
that's
what's a flag for you?
So when it patrols, it can identify a person, a group of people, an object, or objects or a vehicle. And it logs, yes, at this time I saw this, I saw something that looks like a person. At this time I saw something that looks like a group of people. At this time I saw a vehicle with this license plate number, and that information is just stored.
So that's all it's not saying I think I saw a fight.
No. no,
Okay,
yes.
so it's still relying upon a human being to review the, I saw a person or whatever, to however many times it saw a person in a day, to go through and physically look at it and then make a determination as it would with the physical camera if anything happened.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But like with the physical cameras, it's unlikely that somebody's going to go through all that data without a request at a certain time for a certain event that was reported.
Well, and a lot of the physical cameras now too, they have sensors and they will say they can detect, I think it's an animal, or I think it's a person, or, those, so I'm assuming it's similar technology. Okay, so there's no independent decision being made. It's just flagging some sort of movement. Someone reviews it. There's a process by which a human being, and how many people are on that team that are going to do that on your end?
So we have just one security
It's
person.
just one person?
Just one
Okay,
person.
okay.
For all three PLDs.
Got it.
The Nightscope team, they monitor they have multiple robots all over the country, and we don't have staff dedicated to just the county. So
Okay.
they would be doing this as part of a.
So one thing that I'd like to
Overall.
ask as follow-up, as you're getting the training, I would be curious to know the reporting procedure. And again, I'm still not hearing, it sounds like it could be informal or an email, or when something is shared with law enforcement. I think there needs to be a record of either a request or in what was shared and when it was shared, if it's obviously subject to an investigation or there's a warrant. I mean, we just need to be very transparent about what is being shared, how it's being shared, and how to determine and when it's being shared and what is being. Does that make sense?
It does, and we
Okay.
can work with our colleagues on what that looks like. And it's not unique to the parking environment. We have similar requests for other data sources we have, like the ride-on bus cameras, that we
Absolutely.
can try to
And-
be clear about how that's managed.
Yeah, and I just think it's good practice, and I hope it. I don't know what this will yield, but I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to try. I'll end with something good. I think it's good to be trying to make sure we're knowing what's going on in our parking garages, but obviously not scaring people, and that's why all the outreach and all these questions we're asking are really important before we get into it. So, thank you, Madam
Thank you.
President.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you, Madam President. Just wanted to be clear, the parking garage is a public space, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and we have a duty to try to protect the public in our public spaces that owned and operated by the county?
Yes.
Okay. And I have encountered an older iteration of a Parker at a grocery store. His name is Marty. He's as tall as me. Marty, maybe not as high tech as Parker, I don't know. But to Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez's questions about Parker's movements, ability to move quickly, and or its sluggishness, I observed Marty, who operates in a store owned by Giant Foods, take out several end cap displays. Okay, and I say that because then, like, if Parker is crashing into parked vehicles in the parking garage, we may in fact have some liability issues there with respect to vehicle damage. So have you seen, known, contemplated that, and how that works with Parker in its very brief test period so far?
We haven't seen anything like that so far, and Parker is slow. He moves at about the same speed as someone walking. So he's not going to race out of the way of something. He can amble out of the way of something as anybody can at 3 miles per hour. In terms of the navigation, it's not relying on video for navigation. It's a LiDAR navigation system. And while we don't know if it's going to work perfectly, the
Right.
expectation is that it will sense the objects and avoid them.
Okay, so while Parker may not have peripheral vision, Parker may in fact have sensors that
He has
function like
sensors.
peripheral
Well,
vision.
He has tremendous peripheral vision. He
Okay.
can see 100% of the way around his head.
All right.
But he's not relying on that for navigation.
Okay. You know, one of the things that sort of comes to mind, and I think a lot of, nobody's asked it yet, and I'm kind of surprised. How much does Parker weigh?
Oh, 500 pounds-ish.
Yeah, 420 pounds.
Okay, so it would take a lot of people to lift Parker, if you will.
Yes, it would be very difficult to move Parker.
Okay. What is Parker's crash worthiness? If you say Parker walks like a pedestrian walking, and Parker is not able to duck out of the way of a vehicle that may in fact find Parker to be a fun target, how nimble could Parker be in that kind of a situation, and how much force can it withstand?
I do not have the answer to that at this point, but yes, we will follow up and make sure we have that information. But I suspect if somebody drives towards Parker, Parker is not going to be able to get out of the way.
Right, as noted with Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez's parking, yes. Okay, just wanted, that I think is helpful to know, because then when you're looking at what's the net result of this pilot program in terms of incidents reduced by the presence of Parker, what is the cost of the unit? What is the cost of replacement of the unit? Does Parker survive the test period intact, right?
Yeah.
These are all really relevant questions to figuring out the efficacy of the overall program. So
I believe, but Mr. Tamana can correct me, that the damage to the robot in that sort of situation is part of the
of your
maintenance
contract?
provision in the contract.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Mink?
Thank you, Madam President. What will success look like coming out of this pilot? What categories of incidents do you expect to see most impacted? What are you going to be looking for? What do you expect?
Thanks for that question. I touched on it a little bit, but I think the headline measure of success is a reduction in overall incidents in the garage. We would like it to just generally reduce the number of things happening there that are other than people parking and taking advantage of the Silver Spring Business District. In addition to that, if there are events requiring investigation, and as Mr. Tamana said, we generally hear about them based on a report of a crime or damage rather than from the surveillance itself. We hope that Parker will have provided some useful information related to that event. Now again, he's traveling 5 floors of the garage and unlikely to be at the location of an incident when it happened, but that could happen. So we're hoping that is an outcome. Again, it has a call for service button. So if we have any credible need for service that's used for, that would be good for us to know, and that would be a measure of success if Parker helped somebody get help when they were in distress in the garage. I think a negative measure of performance would be a lot of false calls using that button. Those are the principal outcomes that we're hoping to see from this. And the other one I think would be, and I don't know if we have a perception study planned, but a perception of safety in the garage, and did people find that Parker made them feel better about parking there, or the opposite extreme, did Parker make them feel worse about parking there? Those would be the 2 outcomes we would have from customer perception. And that's something we could look to gather later on in the pilot once it's been normalized a little bit and being there. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I wanted to check because, as you noted, the great majority of the incidents that we're looking to reduce here are trash. You mentioned trash, loitering, property stuff, right? You said in your words minor, right? So I just wanted to clarify to make sure I'm clear that the benefit here largely is going towards a reduction in minor incidents, like trash and quote unquote loitering. The use to call for help, is that something that we could also install more of those like blue light buttons, correct?
That could be done.
Yes.
I mean, that's not part of this program, but that's an option. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I just want to be clear about the benefits, because I think that there are a lot of concerns, especially as the council president noted, at at these times with the federal government and the overreach being what it is, our very large immigrant population, and the way that the federal government is obviously, is abusing the law, is breaking the law, is acting unconstitutionally, et cetera. Now I recognize that there's a contract here that you own the material produced, et cetera. At the same time, I think that the fears and concerns amongst, I would gander many in our community, could certainly be exacerbated by seeing a surveillance robot running around the garage. Nightscope, the company who is running this, they're the ones who are doing most of the monitoring of the actual footage, given that we only have one person doing that. They're providing the daytime summaries of the events. They are doing the overnight monitoring. They've also signed a multi-year agreement with Palantir Technologies, who, of course, Palantir is the company that Trump has tapped to pull together data on Americans from all sorts of unorthodox corners that they're able to reach into. And so I think that there are likely to be, certainly should be, some concerns there. The Nightscope is also part of an association, a nonprofit organization that is working on lobbying the government for changes in policies and in funding priorities directly related to uncrewed systems across government and industry. So I think that this needs to be something that we're taking very seriously. Is this a conversation that you all have had internally about any concerns about connections now or potential future connections between this data, Nightscope, and the federal government, especially given that there could be policy changes that come down the line?
Councilmember Mink, it's not something that we have explored in tremendous detail. We've been relying upon the contract provisions about the data ownership and the protocols for the exchange of that data and the destruction of that data. But certainly the concerns that you raise are ones that we need to be aware of and take into consideration as this program is formalized.
Okay, I think that's going to be really critical, really critical. The CEO of Nightscope said, "We're proud to collaborate with other industry pioneers to accelerate the adoption of life-saving autonomous technologies, and we intend to help shape the policies that will make America safer and stronger in the years and decades to come." And that is in regards to their intentions to lobby the federal government, again, with whom they have, they are now working via Palantir. And so I think it's important that information also, Nightscope, a little bit of background about who they are and what they do, that needs to be part of the community engagement sessions. We need to be fully transparent with the public. I also want to, back up a second. There have been references to the drone program, and again, I think we've all really commended MCPD on the outreach that they did when that first showed up in the budget as a proposal, and I asked that be delayed for more outreach, and the council agreed, and MCPD agreed, and they really took that and ran with it. They did numerous engagement sessions all across the county, and they came back with a funding request for the next budget session a year later. It was very effective, and it helped to pull together some clear parameters. Some of them they already had, but making sure that the public knew what they were, and that there was a way, because it's now they have said it publicly. There's clarity, and there's accountability. It was really good for a number of reasons, and I think that's part of why there have been very few, if any, complaints about it. I can't imagine them being able to condense all of that outreach work into 1 month. Is there a reason why the outreach for a program like this would be able to be effective within such a much shorter time span than that?
We weren't trying to give the impression we were doing it within a month. It's more like a 2.5 to 3 month period. And again, we would continue to have outreach if Parker is deployed in the garage about how it's working in service. So no, I don't think we're trying to compress it to a month, and I do think that would be unreasonable. But we are looking to have some conclusions and summary from our public outreach and input gathered and what are the main themes we were hearing by early October.
Okay. Even 2.5, 3 months, it feels very rushed compared to, again, the schedule. And so I know that you're on a contract, then money has already been spent and the clock already started ticking. And I think that that's very unfortunate for a number of reasons. And it's also unfortunate if that now means that we're going to do just less thorough, front end community engagement and outreach than we would have otherwise. And I would note especially the importance of engaging in a really thoughtful way with the immigrant community, as the council president raised, having sessions in other languages. And I would suggest also doing sessions with and providing information directly to our partners and community groups who work with the immigrant community, asking for their help in gathering feedback from their members, and in a context where we'll actually get that feedback from them. I think definitely contact CASA and let them know that you would like to talk to them about how best to get some feedback from their members, and make sure that we're really clear on the feelings specifically from those who are under very, very direct attacks right now from the federal government, from Palantir, and from Knightscope. Is that something that you'd be amenable to?
Yeah, and thank you for sharing these concerns. And we do hear them and appreciate that they're real. In terms of the time frame, it may be more reasonable in this case. The deployment is in a very limited footprint. It's a portion of the one garage. So I think in that regard, the time frame may be more suitable than if we had, for example, a pilot we were trying across the entirety of the PLD. Hopefully that gives a little bit of ability.
The drone program is the same thing. The drone started off as a pilot in one location, and yet they talked to people all across the entire county, because everybody from the county goes to that location, right? And because the consideration that is underhand that's underway here is to figure out whether this is something that we want to expand, which means that it's important to get views from across the county as well.
Well, expand or continue at all. I would leave out there, and I think Councilmember Fani Gonzalez mentioned it. Yeah. We don't have proof that this is going to provide us useful information yet. And if it turns out that it's not, there's no reason to continue with it. So the pilot is indeed to see whether there's a valid concept here or not.
Yeah,
before we even worry about expanding.
I will join Councilmember Fani Gonzalez and just say that I am very dubious that we are going to get results that are compelling enough that we are going to say that we should roll this out with this partnership, having this company looking at data, looking at images from our residents here, potentially, creating additional fears to our immigrant community, adding on to what they already fear, so that we can reduce trash in the garage. I think that we could also, put up more trash cans. We can install a few more of the same cameras that we already have in the stairwells, et cetera. And I bet also, if you look at the financial cost there and weigh all of those out, I'm very dubious that we're going to come out of this saying like, yeah, this seems like a good investment for our community. I yield.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson?
Thank you. Appreciate this conversation. Glad that we're having it. I think we all acknowledge the rollout wasn't very good. So we have, first step is having this conversation itself. This should have happened on the front end. I think it would have been helpful to us. It would have been helpful to the community. It would have been helpful to Parker, our new 420-pound friend, who people don't know who he is, and now they'll get a chance or who they are. I don't know, Parker's dynamics here, but I'm glad that Councilmember Fani Gonzalez has had the opportunity to meet the robot. I have not, but look forward to that encounter. I'm all for the cutting edge versus the bleeding edge. I appreciate the fact that there are other jurisdictions that have employed this. Do you have a sense of what the specific benefits are in those jurisdictions? What has the deployment of a robot in a parking lot achieved in terms of the outcomes that we'd be looking from here, and what were the pitfalls and things that we're doing differently in our pilot that would address those?
So in the the few references that we did check, I think the biggest factor that they mentioned was just the visible deterrence. Just, it was so visible that it caused a more awareness of public safety in that general area. So people were more cautious about what they were doing, and whether it leads to, in our garages, leads to reduced incidents of criminal activity, we don't know yet. But I think that was the biggest thing that people told us, was it was just very visible and was a visible deterrent to bad activity.
This is a silly question, but I assume that the 420-pound robot doesn't do steps?
No, it does not. So it only patrols the decks and the ramps.
I'll just note that some of the more dangerous activities and places in parking garage are actually stairwells. So I just would note that. I'm just trying to get a sense of what the solution is here. What is the comparison of a robot to a still camera in terms of cost? So this costs $90,060 to deploy in one parking garage. It gets a certain amount of footage. I'm assuming that you think the benefit is it moves, right? I mean, it's a camera that moves.
Yes, and you'll have a series of, it's doing a patrol route, so you'll have a series of coverage over the entirety of those floor plates of the garage. And
So
again,
how many I'm just trying to understand the cost difference of deploying a certain, like how many cameras could we get for the same cost of one robot?
So a typical camera installation, again, depending on the location, can range anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000, including installation costs, power, communications, everything.
Okay, so assume 4 or 5 still cameras to one robot.
Correct.
Okay, so the benefit of the robot is it moves. The negative is that it's limited, right? It only captures where it is at the moment that it's there, right? So there's a positive and negative. On a still camera, the benefit is it's always running, essentially, or could always run if you wanted it to. The negative is you can't face a camera in every direction at all times, always. So there are effectively dead zones. So this is the cost benefit question that we have to do. I would like, as we analyze this, to have a cost difference of what it would cost to increase the camera coverage versus the robot as we are analyzing this moving forward at whatever timeline we take up, because I think that would be helpful. I am all for adding cameras. I am all for trying to enhance safety. I am concerned about the fact this is a solution that doesn't address what I think is among the bigger concerns, which are stairwells in parking garages. So I would want to know what the plan is and would be for that. And then do we use a similar AI algorithm for our still cameras, or the idea is it's just repeated footage and eventually if there is a problem reactively it could be investigated and could be used in a police investigation or it could be used for security personnel?
Yeah, that's correct. We do not use any AI or any technology with our existing camera footage.
Is there any reason why we couldn't deploy similar? I think one of the benefits here is to do an analysis that we don't have to have a human being go through hundreds of hours of footage covering every area to see if there are certain activities. If we utilize AI in some way to help a person be more efficient with their time, to me, that seems like the secret sauce here. Can we do that with still cameras? Is there an option available to us for that?
So some of the newer cameras that we've recently installed does have the capability, again, of detecting events. So it knows that a person was there. It knows that an object moved past its field of vision. So when you search, you can search based on that. with Parker. So you have that ability with Parker to say, okay, can you give me any events of movement that happened between 12 and 3 on this day? So you're not having to search through all the footage.
Which retroactively would be helpful, but proactively is really not all that helpful.
Yes.
Okay, so this is more of a retroactive tool and a deterrence than it really is a proactive public safety tool. I just think we have to acknowledge what it is and what it isn't, what it can do and what it can't do. It's fairly limited in terms of the efficacy of what it could actually achieve.
That's correct.
It doesn't do stairwells. It really has limited information that it's actually sharing. It's really more retroactive than it is proactive. It's a slight enhancement to.
All of that is
still-
accurate.
Okay.
And it's as you mentioned, it's mobile. So it's giving you kind of a full coverage as it does its patrol rather than just the
A
fixed
fuller coverage, I would
fuller
say. Yeah.
coverage of the areas that it goes. So it's not
Sure.
covering stairwells or, in this case, 2 of the levels of the garage.
Okay, so realistically, it started in June. It's supposed to go a year for $90,000, $90,060. It was delayed, so maybe it goes a little bit into July or August or whatever the case may be, based on when you start it back up again. What is the timeline for analysis that you're going to make a decision, and then when are you going to come back to us? When are you going to come back to the public? And is there going to be an ask to continue it from then? Is there going to be a break? What's the plan?
Well, if it's effective, we'd like to continue it. So in order to do that, we would need to do the data analysis before the end of the contract term. So that would give us 6 to 9 months of data to work with. If it's inconclusive at that time, it may be the case that we go on a pause and reconsider it. But if we're seeing productive use of this, I think we would like to have that outcome known before the end of the program, which could be as late as next September.
Are you going to analyze the effectiveness before you make a budget ask to us, or is the idea you're going to make a budget ask no matter what and then decide the efficacy and then determine whether or not you deploy the resources in that way?
I don't think we would have usable data to inform the next operating budget process. So it's likely that if we wanted to continue it, we would either have to identify that capacity within the existing security budget and continue it in that manner. Of course, we can brief the council on the findings of the pilot in either case.
Okay, so the expectation is if it continues, it will be based on a full year, as close to a full year as possible, and it would come out of existing resources within the security budget, but that you would brief the council before you made that determination.
We can certainly provide a briefing to the council, or a written briefing, or in person, whichever the council would prefer, about whether this program is effective or ineffective.
Well, I yield to the current and the future council president, but I think a briefing of the council would be appropriate before a decision was made on the pilot. And ultimately, it's just helpful to understand what the thought process is, and how you plan to address it. I have lots of other questions. I'm sure others do too, but I will yield back in the interest of time.
Great, thank you. I want to pick up on something Council Member Friedson talked about on the stairwells, because we've had these conversations. Do we have cameras right now in the stairwells in the garages?
Not in all the garages. So when we started the project, we started installing in critical areas. So some of the stairwells do have them. We started covering entrances and exits, both pedestrian and vehicular. So we've been doing that across all of the garages. And then the second round, we're going to come back and start filling in cameras. So just to give you an idea, to fully cover a garage, we probably are looking at somewhere between 60 to 70 cameras being installed in there, additional cameras being installed in there. So it's a significant cost. And again, like Director Conklin mentioned, it's a multi-layered approach. One tool is not going to give us that total security picture. It's the human security patrols, it's the static camera systems, and if we have this as a successful technology that we could use, it's another piece that would fit in and provide a fuller picture.
No, I completely understand. I just, I think as the district council member that this was done in, and not informed, and also as the district council member who asked for years for cameras and was told time and time again that there was not enough money in the budget to do it, to to see us do this and not have been informed, even though I know we were moving forward with some of the cameras after many asks about this, especially in the stairwells, is just, I think, where some of the frustration comes from. And I appreciate that Director Conklin has acknowledged that, but I do think in terms of the analysis, really thinking about where the need is for safety is my concern. Whether or not we have some young people where you say loitering, which I can't stand that term, and I would really appreciate us not using that for our public spaces, particularly in some of our downtown areas, because I'm not sure what that means in a public space where we actually do want people who are coming together. Like what are the measures here that we're looking at, and what are some of the trade-offs for the resources we have? So I think in terms of some of the next steps, I really appreciate some of the information. It would be helpful if it was communicated to us about the engagement plans. Just like we had an incredibly close partnership with Commander Kokinas on the DFR program so that we could participate in that. We could also help get the information out, be party to those plans, as well as, the protocols that will be developed. I think Council Vice President Jawando raised a couple of things that he would like to see in those protocols. But just, I think we need a lot more communication on this and thinking about how we're going to be evaluating this pilot moving forward, because I think, as you heard, even though there was, some snickering and joking about this, it's a very serious topic. And we, want to make sure that we're evaluating this appropriately, spending our money wisely, and want to make sure we're engaging the public. So we thank you for being here today. Yeah,
absolutely
Director Conklin.
welcome
Yeah.
any guidance or input on the appropriate connections that we need to make sure the public understands what this program is about.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. All right, we're done with that. I think we have one more item on our agenda this afternoon. The council will sit again as the district council for a work session action on zoning text amendment 25-05, development standards, optional method, public benefits. The Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee recommends approval with amendments. As Ms. Nadeau takes her seat, I'm going to turn it over to Chair Friedson, who can share the committee's recommendations.
Thank you, Madam President. Welcome to Ms. Nadeau. Appreciate all of her work, as well as Chair Harris, Director Sartori, Deputy Directors Cronenberg and Sharma. We'll welcome up them to join us at the table. I'll give a quick overview of the committee's work and appreciate colleagues who have been working collaboratively really on this effort with the planning department and with council staff on moving this forward. ZTA 2505 updates the public benefit system in the commercial, residential, and employment zones. The council will note that it was briefed on the overview of this effort and was able to ask some questions. The committee has been discussing it for quite some time, even before the introduction of this zoning text amendment itself. The county has had a public benefits point system since 2010, which allows applicants to receive additional approved density in exchange for providing certain public benefits. In 2022, the planning department, at our direction, began a comprehensive review of the system using data analysis and input from stakeholders, the public, relevant county departments, and by a consultant that was brought in to help with the work. The planning board transmitted the incentive zoning update in October 2024. The Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee reviewed the proposal on December 2nd, December 9th. The PHP Committee recommended the introduction of a ZTA implementing the proposal, and that became what is now ZTA 2505, which was introduced on April 29th. A public hearing was held on June 10th. The Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee held a work session on June 16th and is now recommending approval with amendments, which Ms. Nadeau will walk us through. Just want to thanks again to the planning department for all of your hard work on this, especially to Mr. Sharma, a lot of efforts undertaken, and to the team, and to Mr. Ali on council staff as well. There was quite a bit of effort here, and some people wearing multiple hats throughout this process. We have current council staff who was previously planning staff when this was undertaken, which speaks to the speed at which government operates at times, for better and for worse, and notwithstanding those who think we move too slowly and those who think we move too quickly. This is a major improvement that will hopefully better align our master plan visions with the projects on the ground, ensuring that we actually are getting the benefits that support our public priorities and that support local communities and countywide priorities. The goal here was to really streamline the number of public benefits, to modernize those public benefits to reflect our current priorities, and to find the right balance of allowing projects to occur and investment to happen, but in a way that actually supports what we want, and also finding that similar balance between the parochial needs of a particular community, perhaps most impacted by a certain development and community project, with the broader countywide priorities and countywide needs. This is always the push and take, and this is something that I think the zoning text amendment does a very effective job in balancing, and appreciate all of the thoughtful work to get us to this point. We're going to take up two issues at the end, including the effective date based on a consensus that we've received from council and planning staff, just to allow us to move forward in a thoughtful way and allow time for us to get our ducks in a row and to provide some stability, which we will take up at the end. With that, I will turn it back to you, Madam President, turn to council staff to walk us through the packet and to move us through this item.
Great, thank you. Ms. Joe, you ready to go?
I am ready.
Go ahead, you can walk us through the packet.
All right, so we are going to start on page 11 of the packet, which is the committee work session. And I will start by going through some of the amendments that the committee recommended. So first is master plans and overlay zones. So the ZTA goes through the incentive, this new incentive density system, but didn't talk about what happens when there are new master plans. As you know from your work going through master plans, they also specify certain public benefits. So there is an amendment that specifically says that master plans are allowed to modify this menu of options as long as it's in line with the intent of the ZTA. Second is an amendment about site plan review in the EOF zone. So the ZTA has introduced removed EOF from the zone that requires optional method, and in exchange for that also required site plan for any development over 0.5 FAR, which is a lower threshold than there had been before. There is a section of the zoning ordinance 734A that has certain requirements for when site plan should be required. After feedback from developers, the committee agreed to use that table instead of the 0.5 FAR threshold for the EOF zone, not the LSC zone. Second is off-site improvement criteria. This was another request received from written testimony, and that was an amendment to allow features such as fully protected intersections, new traffic signals, and certain lengths of bikeway to be Tier 4 benefits here. To go back a little, the way the menu works is there's different categories, and then there's Tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, depending on the intensity of the public benefit. Since these are major improvements, the request was to put these in Tier 4. Another note here, there are going to be implementation guidelines, and those guidelines will define what an off-site major transportation improvement is. So while it's not laid out in the ZTA, there will be a document from planning that explains that. Next is grandfathering projects in the CRT zone. This was another request from written testimony. So as noted under the ZTA, the threshold for optional method in the CRT zone is being lowered from 1 FAR to 0.5 FAR. This is because in going through this study, planning and the consultants found that there's some pretty big projects in those CRT zones that should trigger the public benefit system. And so that FAR threshold was lowered. And the way it was written originally is with sketch plan approval, that could be grandfathered in. But because the FAR was lower, some of those projects that are in progress and already have certain phases weren't under sketch plan. So the amendment from the committee here was agreeing that those projects that already went through standard method should be grandfathered in, and then including language that explains that based on the type of application. So you'll see that language on page 14. It's a plan that was approved for sketch plan, preliminary plan, site plan, conditional use, local map amendment, record plat, or building permit, a good summary of all the different zoning approvals that developers get, and then grandfathering in those projects if they've already begun. And the reason is with really big projects, there's often multiple phases. So you don't want to be on phase 3 and have to start over because you need to relook at your public benefits. The next 2 amendments from the committee were clarifying amendments. These, I believe, were both recommended by DPS. The first is referring to the Green Code as the International Green Construction Code. And then the second is under the, I think the building or environmental standards is LEED BD plus C version 4.1. The recommendation here is to say LEED BD plus C and the most recently updated standards because there is a new update expected soon. Next, for amendments the committee looked at were removing optional method development for the LSC and EOF zones. There's actually no amendment here, but I did flag it because it's a discussion point that's come up a couple times. So I don't actually remember the exact date. I think sometime early in the spring, the council approved ZTA 2403, which was the Great Seneca Life Sciences Overlay Zone. And as part of that ZTA, it recommended not carrying over a provision that exempted hospitals from providing BLTs. At the time, the committee decided to focus on the overlay zone and come back to incentive zoning, which is today. And so the question from the committee had been whether hospitals should be exempted from this BLT requirement, not just in the overlay zone, but across the optional method. Upon further review, it turned out to be an easier answer than we thought, that there were no hospitals outside of the GLSLS overlay zone where incentive density would apply, and therefore BLTs wouldn't be required. So the issue was moot, so there was no amendment from the committee there. Okay, so those were the amendments that the committee had discussed. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the 2 discussion points for today. Okay, so as you all likely remember, recently Expedited Bill 225 created a pilot for conversions of office to residential, and that was passed after this incentive zoning ZTA had been introduced. And so there was a question on how the units for the pilot would fit into this incentive density framework. Under ZTA 2505, an application that provides, quote, more than the minimum MPDUs required by the county or an applicable master plan is eligible to receive incentive density. So council staff's interpretation of that is that MPDUs that make an applicant eligible for the pilot are not MPDUs required by the county, since the county isn't making you do the pilot, an applicant is choosing to do so. So there's a lot of nuances here. The first is that the maximum allowable affordability level for MPDUs right now is 70% of AMI, although developers can, of course, opt for lower affordability levels. And if a developer restricts the affordability units to 60% of AMI or lower, and then puts them into the MPDU program, they would both be eligible for the pilot and basically automatically receive Tier 1 or Tier 2 incentive density, which would get them that additional 2.5 FAR if no changes are made. And what the committee had asked for is a feasibility analysis to see, is that the only option here? Should this be changed? And so another thing I will note here is under the pilot, the way that it was drafted, there was not a requirement that those units be MPDUs. It's 60% AMI for 20 years, which is slightly different from the MPDU program, which has a longer control period. Truthfully, it's probably likely that because we already have a 12 to 15% MPDU requirement in every zone, most of those units would have to be MPDUs when you overlay those 2 sections of code, but there's a little gap where the developer hypothetically could choose one or the other. And so comparing those 2 things, the committee had asked for a feasibility analysis, which is why we have our consultant, Hyatt Brown, here, who helped with this incentive zoning study from the beginning. And staff and the consultant looked at 3 different scenarios to determine the extent to which a pilot eligible project could absorb any additional costs, such as incentive density. So those scenarios are at the top of page 18. So scenario one is if it's a demolition of a smaller building and they do a new build for a bigger building, and that's what's meant by increased density there. Sorry, this is page 18. Scenario two is a demolition and a new build for a like-size building. And then lastly is an adaptive reuse, which we know are much more expensive. So if you run all three of those scenarios under the pilot, what was found is that really scenario one is the feasible project that you're looking at here, where you're tearing down an office and then putting in more units. So that is scenario one for you. Emphasizing likely because we understand development is different across the county, but on average, this is what the consultant found. So if you jump back to the incentive density system, there are two options that council staff thought of for the council's consideration here. The very first option is to maintain the status quo. As noted, as written, it says required by the county, which does not include the pilot. So under option one, meaning if the council makes no changes on this today, then pilot eligible projects that choose to make all their 17.5 MPDU are automatically going to get tier 1 or tier 2 incentive density because they'll have that extra FAR. Something to add here is under the incentive density system, you do have to provide public benefits from two broader categories. One is countywide needs and one is local needs. So this would satisfy one of those categories. They'd still need to hit at least probably one tier from the other category, which tends to be transportation and community amenities like art and neighborhood access. So that is option one. Option two, the council could do an amendment that says pilot eligible projects to obtain incentive density need to provide something above the pilot. So the analogy I'd use here is you're treating the pilot like you would a master plan. You got those units under the pilot, but you still need to provide more public benefits, and that would be option two for you. So there's, as you'll note, no council staff rec here. These are both policy questions for the council on which option you think makes more sense given the pilot and the intent of the incentive density. Something I'd flag here is the pilot was all about feasibility. That was the reason the pilot was done, was to make these projects feasible. The ZTA is about incentive density, which is balancing feasibility with public benefits. So the question is whether you'd like those pilot projects, which would be feasible under both option one or two, to encourage them to make all that 17.5 be MPDU and maintain the status quo, or have the tiny 2 to 5%, which hypothetically they could have not be MPDUs and then provide other public benefits instead. So those are the two options before you, and I have all our brilliant real estate consultants here if you have further questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nadeau. I'll turn it first to the chair of PHP, Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for all of the work. I really appreciate the really thoughtful discussion that we had in committee on this entire zoning text amendment, particularly on this issue. I thought it'd be helpful to hear from planning on this and speaking to this issue, if there are any thoughts on it, and also explain, because I think there was a lot in a very methodical overview of this, but one of the key differences, in order to get the pilot, you do not necessarily have to have an MPDU for the additional 2.5%. In order to get this additional density, you do have to have all of the 17.5% at minimum be MPDU. The difference is the control period, which we've talked a lot about here, which is significant. It's the difference between a 20-year control period and a 99-year control period. So one of the concerns, and that wasn't raised in committee, and I think it's a really important point, was getting something for nothing. That is not nothing. That is significant. Now, if it's not enough, for those who feel that it's not enough, that's a reasonable position to take. But I think it's important for us to note and to highlight that there is a difference between MPDU and control for 20 years, and the difference is 79 years of control. So that is, significant, particularly with the housing challenges that we have. The other thing to reiterate is that it's not no public benefits or doing public benefits. It's just that this part of the public benefits that would be required would be satisfied. Some of the other public benefits, as noted, transportation, other, public community, local benefits would need to be satisfied. Just wanted to turn to planning for any thoughts or feedback on that, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you for the record, Atul Sharma. I think we looked at this with the intent to provide some context, and I might look to Jay and Afan to share just sort of some of their read on the market currently and what type of projects they're seeing penciling versus not, because I think that's also a very important part of the deliberations that you all are undertaking today. But in general, I think Council Member Friedson, you summed it up well in that if you go with option one, you're not just getting what the pilot would get you. You are likely going to get a small amount of MPDUs that will remain MPDUs for an additional 80 years. So over 80 years, from a developer's perspective, those are generating less rent. They sort of, they are a line item in the pro forma. They do make less money of those. They do produce rent, which is, I think, also important to note. So there's that. I also, just as a contextual comment here, the optional method projects we get range in the amount of FAR they're asking. There are some that are just asking for 1.5 or 2 FAR or 2.5 FAR, but then you also have projects that are going up to 4 FAR, 5 FAR. In downtown locations like Silver Spring and Bethesda, you actually have projects that buy incentive density in return for park impact payments or the community improvement fund, and their overall FAR is going up to 9, 10 FAR. So even if somebody got some FAR for putting those extra 2.5% MPDUs into that control period of additional 80 years, they will likely still have to provide other public benefits. It might be just another small public benefit if they're just trying to bridge that gap of 0.25 FAR or 5 FAR, but it also might be a bucket of additional public benefits if they're trying to get to 4 or 5 FAR as their total requested FAR. But with that, I just wanted to turn it to Jay. Maybe, Jay, you can speak a little bit about what you're seeing out in the marketplace and what type of projects are penciling, and especially how these projects have to go through their cost considerations to make feasibility work.
Sure. Thank you. For the record, Madam President, Council Members Jay Brown, the Chairman and Managing Director at Hyatt Brown. It's been a great pleasure working with the team on this project. Conversions of office to residential need a subsidy. It's a very challenging economic transition. And so, having the pilot was absolutely critical to create some incentives for that. So applaud you for that. But the question that was raised in the hearing was also a very good question too. Was there, excess sort of benefit being given? So when we looked at these scenarios, we asked ourselves, so what are the unique costs that these conversions have? And we sort of summarized it in 3 big buckets because they're not usual costs for a development. One is really the paying off of the existing debt. Most of office products that have debt on them are collateral that was secured by an office product. If you convert that product, you have to do something else with that debt, defease it, pay it off, and there's a cost to that. So we had to make some estimates and some assumptions around what is that cost. Another is the lease terminations for the 50% of tenants that will still be in the building. The owner has to make some accommodation for that. They either have to pay off the tenant or relocate them. So there's a cost to that. And then there's demolition costs if you actually tear it down and rebuild. So we tried to keep the analysis simple, but with enough rigor that it could really drive a policy decision from you all. And what we found was that when you have a scenario where a smaller building is torn down and rebuilt at a higher density, there's some value there. There's room there. But the minute you get away from that scenario, it's a challenge to make the product, the conversion, economically feasible. And so, it's it's a policy decision, obviously, that you all are making in terms of how you address this scenario. But our analysis suggests that it's a challenge under the best of circumstances to get a conversion to work economically. And so, again, with the exception of that one scenario, and that's what we're seeing in the market as well. That's why we're not seeing as many conversions as folks would like to see in the market.
Appreciate that. I will yield back.
Great. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all your work. It has been fascinating going through all the work sessions on this topic, starting from the econ work sessions on the office conversions. I'm going to make this very simple because I think you made your points very clear. I think I'm going to move for option 1 on the packet. These conversions are very expensive, and anything that we can do to ensure that they actually move forward is the right thing to do, is worth it. So I move for option 1.
We don't actually, if we do option 1, we actually don't need an amendment. So just
That
to be
is
clear.
correct.
Yeah, so if option 1, we actually don't need an amendment.
Good point.
It's, if someone would like to argue for and move option 2, that would actually be amending it. So if we want to look at that, but if it's option 1, then we don't need to do that. So, okay. So Council Vice President Jawando. I know you guys.
Thank you. There's some gusto for that. I'm the other member of the committee that requested a lot of this analysis and talked about the double dipping and the double benefit and the fact that you get the property tax abatement, which I think again could be useful. We won't relitigate that. Not as generous as it passed, but for the demolition. You don't have to build anything. You could just get it for knocking it down. I just want to throw that out there as well. But the scenario that we're talking about here, the two options are just for under the scenario 1, correct?
Yeah, so neither option is going to make scenario 2 or 3 more feasible.
Right.
But scenario 1 remains feasible under both options.
Right, that's what I mean. So it doesn't have an impact. So the analysis of whether it works under scenario 2 or 3 is just, it works. The question is, do we want to require some extra public benefit under the scenario that does work? Is that correct?
That is correct. What the analysis found was that options 2 and options 3 were greatly infeasible. So if you had the pilot incentive, and if you asked for additional public benefits, you would make a significant, somewhat reasonably infeasible project more infeasible.
Right.
So, but for option 1, it was feasible. You could potentially ask for more benefits, but it would also depend on the size of the project and the location of the project, and those characteristics would come into play, whether feasibility. So in other words, I did want to just put a point on this, and Jay, maybe you can explain it better than I can. Scenario 1 is feasible in a general sense. It doesn't mean that every small project that is torn down and rebuilt as a residential will necessarily always be feasible. These are sort of average assumptions.
We try to avoid, that was the other point that I made in the context of this debate, is that all projects are different. Some need a big abatement, some might not need as much, and that's I think that's why you want to do the analysis. So I mean, obviously, I think because you're already getting a benefit in this case, that's why I asked you to do the analysis, that I think we should get as much as possible. A public benefit, given that it is feasible under this scenario. So I would be in favor of doing the second option. We have so I'll make a motion and see if anyone wants to join me.
All right, we have a motion to amend and put in place the second option that's in the packet. Do I have a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Councilmember Mink seconded. Any comments or questions on the amendment we have before us? Councilmember Mink, go ahead, you can go.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I mean, I'll just note that this is all to some extent guesswork that we are doing here. And to Vice President Jawando's point, I think in that case, we need to have a little more stacked on our side. And I think I recognize where the body is going, but I think to be in keeping where I am on this issue, I'm in support of option 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. So I appreciate what Councilmember Fanning Gonzalez mentioned in terms of the whole point of these conversions is to make sure that they happen. And we gave them a considerable incentive, and we don't want to backtrack on that. So I support option 1. Thank you.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you. I heard the word infeasible and feasible, and it continues to be used, but I just want to make sure I heard the consultants correctly, that options 2 and 3 are greatly infeasible. Was that what I heard?
So, yes, but that doesn't mean that every project that is in that scenario will be greatly infeasible. We hope some can get close to feasibility with the support that you're offering. But it's a big challenge, even with the tax abatement, for scenarios 1 and 2 to be feasible in the first place. So
I appreciate that, right? And I was going to say without relitigating, but we are relitigating the decision that this body made a few months ago. In order to get office conversions to become housing, they need support. And by adding more to their plate, you are negating the support that we give them. It is squeezing a stone so hard that you get no additional benefits out of it. And it's a lump of coal. I'll support 1. Thank you.
All right, not seeing any other questions or comments. All those in favor of the amendment for option 2, please raise your hand. Let's see. Did you? Okay, sorry. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. And I have 2 people in favor of the amendment. The amendment does not proceed. Ms. Nadeau, if you want to continue.
Thank you. So the last amendment is a proposed amendment from council staff and planning staff. So as you know, a ZTA takes effect 20 days after the district council adopts it. This ZTA comes with the requirement for the planning board to issue implementation guidelines. I will note here those implementation guidelines are not reviewed by the council. They only go to the board, but of course there's a full public hearing and opportunity for output then. So to make sure that the implementation guidelines are in effect before the ZTA is in effect, the recommendation is to change the effective date of this ZTA to January 1st, 2026.
I would make that motion, Madam President.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Councilmember Sales, second. Any questions or comments on this amendment? Not seeing any. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous of everyone present and online. Ms. Nadeau, anything else?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, we did have an amendment, so I do need a motion to approve the ZTA 25-05 as amended.
So moved.
Councilmember Friedson moved. Councilmember Sales seconded. This is a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lukey?
Yes.
Councilmember Lukey votes yes. Councilmember Mink?
Yes.
Councilmember Mink votes yes. Councilmember Sales?
Yes.
Councilmember Sales votes yes. Councilmember Friesen?
Yes.
Councilmember Friesen votes yes. Councilmember Glass?
Yes.
Councilmember Glass votes yes. Councilmember Katz?
Yes.
Councilmember Katz votes yes. Councilmember Albornoz?
Yes.
Councilmember Albornoz votes yes. Councilmember Fanning Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Fanning Gonzalez votes yes. Councilmember Balcom?
Yes.
Councilmember Balcom votes yes. Councilmember Jawando?
Yes.
Councilmember Jawando votes yes. Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart votes yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your work on that. Thank you for coming and your analysis, and everyone at the planning department. Very much appreciate it. And Chair Howard, my apologies. I did not recognize you earlier. You did. Thank you very much for coming, and Director Satori, who is here as well. Thank you so much. All right. We are going to. Oh,
Sorry, Madam President, on
yes,
the
sorry,
consent calendar item,
sorry.
I wanted to be reflected as voting in the affirmative.
Staying with me. Thank you.
thank you. Sorry. We've got to do that before. All right, that is all for us for today. This meeting's adjourned, and just as a reminder, the council is on recess until September 8th, and that is recess from our formal meetings. As you all know, we are continue to work throughout the month of August, as does our staff and things. So if there's anything people need, please reach out to our offices for assistance. And I just want to say to our county staff, thank you very much for all of your work. I hope folks are able to take a break, at least from our formal meetings in the month of August, until we get back from recess. So thank you all for everything. And with that, we are adjourned.